why are people mean? And I know that I felt a pang in my heart because it was not going to be the only time that she would experience that. That was just the first of many times that she would experience people being mean in her lifetime. And so under that weight of a mother's sadness, I just kind of sighed and I answered, you know, I don't really know, sweetie, why people are mean. Maybe somebody was mean to them somewhere along the way. I just don't really know. And 20 years later, sisters and brothers, I still don't really know the answer to my daughter's heartbreaking question. Why are we mean and heartless at times? Why are vulnerable children of all nationalities suffering at the hands of traffickers? Why are Yazidis and other minority groups in Iraq being persecuted and besieged by ISIS on a sweltering mountaintop in northern Iraq? Why do some of us dehumanize and distance ourselves from Central American children at our borders, indiscriminately labeling them criminals and carriers of disease? Why is the fearful specter of racism rearing its ugly head again in Ferguson and elsewhere? And then, as if our hearts and our heads weren't already reeling from the misery and meanness around us, then on Monday we learned that Robin Williams, one of the few entertainers who could lift our spirits collectively, had lost his battle with depression and taken his own life. And just in case that wasn't enough cause for sadness and horror, pretty soon the mean voices of judgment chimed in, declaring that Williams will spend eternity roasting in hell because he took his own life. I mean, really, people? Why is it that we human beings somehow feel compelled to make things worse, to fuel the fires by our thoughtless, destructive words and actions that pollute and tear down instead of healing and building up our world? And I don't know about you, but lately, when I listen to the news or if I glance at comment threads on social media, I'm often appalled at the mean things that people say and do. I mean, who's with me, right? Anybody? Yeah? Yeah, so guess what? You and I are in good company. Guess who else was appalled at the meanness that he saw around him? Jesus. In fact, when we meet up with Jesus in chapter 15 of Matthew's Gospel today, he was in a really grumpy mood. The day had started with the Pharisees giving him flack about the fact that his disciples ignored the purity laws by eating without washing their hands. And then when he confronted the Pharisees with their own hypocrisy of finding legal loopholes to get around the commandment to help their mothers and fathers by saying, we're serving the Lord, Mom and Dad, so you'll have to get somebody else to take care of you. So we don't have to because we're doing this for God. Then they got angry. And so things were escalating between Jesus and the religious leaders. And as if that weren't bad enough, then on the heels of that exchange, Peter asks Jesus to explain what Jesus probably thought was a rather straightforward teaching, in which Jesus had told the crowd that the things that truly defile a person are born in the heart. Now, Jesus was clearly frustrated that his disciples didn't get it. They still didn't get it. And here it's important to realize that Jesus directed his answer not only to Peter, but to all the disciples. We know this because in the original Greek of the New Testament, the word you is in the plural form, like the southern y'all, or we might say up here north, we'd say you guys. And so he's saying to them, really, he's just letting them have it. He says, don't you guys get it? The stuff that goes into your mouths is processed by your body, and it just goes out into the sewer, and it's gone. But the stuff that comes out of your mouths has its origin in your hearts. And that's the stuff that's really nasty, and it can't be washed away. Evil intentions, murder, adultery, sexual violence of all kinds, theft, lying, lying and slander born in human hearts are the very worst forms of pollution. In comparison, eating with unwashed hands really isn't that big a deal. Now, keeping in mind that Jesus was fully human, I think you and I can understand that he was still feeling frustrated and grumpy as he traveled on to the pagan territory of Tyre and Sidon. And as he walked along, he had some time to ponder why those lost sheep of the house of Israel weren't understanding his teaching. But then as soon as he and his disciples stepped across the geopolitical boundary, they were met by a Canaanite woman who was probably a worshiper of the pagan god Baal. And what did she do? She didn't cross the geopolitical boundaries, but she crossed the social and the religious boundaries to get help for her daughter. She begged Jesus to heal her daughter. She came at those disciples and at Jesus shouting, "Lord, Son of David, heal my daughter." And we don't know how this woman found out about Jesus. It must have been a God thing, I think, because she identified him, as I said, as Lord and Son of David. While Peter, on the other hand, hadn't yet made his confession that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God. That comes in the next chapter of Matthew's Gospel. So this woman is so desperate, and she's heard about Jesus' marvelous ability to heal. And so in her desperation, she trusts that he is the one who can set her daughter free from her demon, which back in that day was the way people understood mental illness, as demon possession. Now, I'm sure that you've already noticed that Jesus' response to the Canaanite woman was quite puzzling and out of character. The first time that she spoke, what did he do? He ignored her. Does that sound like Jesus? No. His disciples then wanted him to send her away because they found her shouting to be so annoying. Yet Jesus didn't send her away. However, the very next words out of his mouth kind of drew a line in the sand as he declared he'd been sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Well, again, the desperate mother dared to cross that line, and she threw herself at Jesus' feet, begging for help. The second. In response, Jesus, who was apparently still focused on feeding his own disciples and getting them to digest the good news, actually insulted this woman at his feet, calling her a dog who was undeserving of the children's bread, the children of Israel, of their bread. Now, amazingly, the woman doesn't flinch or hesitate, but she immediately responds in faith. In fact, her response is almost like that of a rabbi. She turns it back on him and she says, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Wow. That woman schooled Jesus. What an expression of faith. In contrast to Jesus' own disciples, she got it. She implicitly understood that God's grace is so abundant that even a leftover crumb would be enough to heal her daughter. In the end, the Canaanite woman's humble yet persistent expression of trust moved Jesus to praise her great faith and heal her daughter. So, how are you and I to understand this encounter between Jesus and the desperate mother? A woman who his own people regarded as an inferior religious outsider and foreigner. Well, in the past, situation that we can think of in the Gospels, Jesus reached out to those who'd been cast down or cast out. Right? And so in recent years, many scholars have taken then a different approach to this text, and they've approached it by focusing more on Jesus' humanity than on his divinity. And this approach makes a good deal of sense. After all, in Luke's gospel, we read that the human Jesus grew in wisdom and in understanding and in divine and human favor. So we can say that Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman was a very human moment for him. A very human moment. A moment in which he grew in understanding of his own mission. God used a religious outsider and foreigner, as God so often does in the Bible. God used this person who had great faith and understanding to show Jesus that God's love was not reserved only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but was intended for all people. So Jesus grew in understanding of his mission, that it was for the whole world. But wait, there's more. Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman also caused him to grow in his compassion and in his own faith. I want to talk about compassion for a minute. The word compassion literally means, do you know? To suffer with. So, as you and I suffer with others in their suffering, especially with those whom we love, our hearts are touched, and we can grow in compassion and in love and faith. And think about this too. The Hebrew word for compassion is rachamim, which has at its root the word rechem, which means wound. So compassion is something that's born deep within us, in the heart, or even deeper in the womb. Jesus' own heart, my friends, was touched by the depth of the woman's motherly compassion for her daughter. And that moved him to see her in a new way and to have compassion for her as a fellow human being. Dear friends in Christ, everywhere we look, we see suffering, and we find meanness woven into the fabric of life, it seems. So we have no choice but to experience these things somewhere along the way. However, it seems to me that you and I do have a choice in how we respond to the meanness and suffering we experience. Now think for a moment about people that you've met who've experienced great suffering. If you're like me, you've probably met some folks who've responded by becoming bitter and shriveled up inside. But on the other hand, I bet you've probably met a few of those remarkable individuals whose suffering has made them even more tender-hearted and more compassionate than they were before, because they've met that suffering with a strength that is born of faith and love. And those saints have touched you and me with their gentle, resilient faith and compassion. And look around you, because we're blessed to have some of them here with us today. My friends, you and I can have compassion for others, even when we don't agree with them. Even when we look different from them and come from different backgrounds than they do. And even when we believe different things and hold different values than they do. Compassion is born in the heart, and it's the one thing that can break down the barriers that separate us from our neighbors. It's the one thing that can help us to see our common humanity as dear children of God, created in the image of our loving Creator. So, God has given us some freedom to accept or to reject the gift of God's reconciling love. of the food, the crumbs even, that God wishes to scatter in the world. And so in the end, it's up to you and me. Will we allow the world's misery and the meanness we experience to harden our hearts into clenched fists? Fists that cause our words and actions to become left and right hooks, seeking to take down the people and the things that we fear? Or will we allow our experience of suffering to soften our hearts into outstretched palms, into words and actions